Hello YouTube, and welcome to another episode of the Educated Barbarian. And we're jumping straight into it. There are several paragraphs in this episode that are very important, that I personally think are the most important ones in the book, because they discuss the natural limits. There is no point in one's training in which one reaches the end. The instant you think you have finished, you have already strayed from the path. Realize that nothing you do is perfect until you have taken your last breath. Then, when you're dead, you will be seen as having completed the way. A lot of important messages to take in here. So first off, training by itself is its own pursuit. Not just the results of training, but the action of exerting yourself by itself represents something very important. And even if it doesn't produce the results you want, the exertion itself is the goal. It's the path, is what you should be doing every day with your life. We tend to focus too much on the gains and the results, but we tend to forget what brings them. And ultimately, for me, the best way to keep training forever is to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy it, you're going to keep at it until you meet an obstacle. Then you're going to quit. Because the only way for you to go around that obstacle and continue to progress on the path would be to actually find joy and pleasure in the process. Because if you're going to have to study the process, you better take some enjoyment in it. And a training that ends doesn't have a point, as he says, because it would mean that the training had no point to start with, because there was a perfection in it. Meaning that once you've reached that perfection, there's no point in going further. Take, for example, a game, you play a game, and you can go to level 100. And at level 100, that's it, the game is over, there's nothing better to do. People would just quit the game, because why would they keep playing? This is why video games tend to always raise the max level, why they give you stuff, items, equipment that can always get better and better, that you can boost with magic points, your capacities can be boosted forever. Why? Because it's that progression that keeps you going. But if you've integrated the fact that your training has an end, for example with the natural limit, you've already sabotaged your ability to train. So as you see, it's the snake that bites its own tail. You told yourself that there was an end to the training. And because you've told yourself that, you're not going to push yourself, so your body is not going to evolve, and eventually you will meet that end. It's a self-defeating prophecy. Purity without excess and focusing single-mindedly on one thing is difficult to achieve during one's lifetime. If the purity of your training is diluted, then it cannot be called the way. Strive to follow the way of service and samuraihood as your singular pursuit. That is going to be something that is going to be very tough to follow for modern men and modern individuals in general, because this world has us divided. We have to take care of so many things. You have a job, you have a family, you have a social life, you have a government that wants you to fill out forms and send it back to them. Your spirit is not entire. It's not a unit anymore. It's preoccupied with so many things. But it's still up to you to decide that you're going to use most of that energy on one thing. And that thing is going to be the way. And the way can be anything, but if you're on this channel, it's going to be training. And if you make training a priority and a part of your schedule, even if it's not the top priority, it's still going to keep it pure. It's still going to keep it untouched. All right? If it's just something you do when you feel like it, then it's not going to have the impact that it has on people who follow it, whatever happens. In the same vein, Shoujo says, it is ruinous to pursue two ways. The warriors need only train in Bushido, the way of the samurai. I'm just going to pause here and turn the light on. And we're back. The warriors need only train in Bushido, the way of the samurai, and seek nothing else. The character for all ways is the same. Nevertheless, one cannot master the way of the warrior while simultaneously becoming immersed in the teachings of Shinto and Buddha. If one understands this, then learning about the other ways will serve to improve your training in the pursuit of Bushido. This is an important paragraph. Why? Because before that, Yamamoto has shown a sort of, covert disdain for the other paths, arts, religion, etc. Here he explains what he means by it. If you become fully immersed in two ways, you're never going to be able to go much further on the way of the samurai because you're also on another way. It becomes really tough. It's the equivalent of trying to become an excellent swimmer and become a very good chess player. It's possible by all means, but you're going to have to make some sacrifices. And the more the activities are physical, the tougher it becomes, because at least with chess, it's a mental activity, right? So you can still use all of your physicality points on swimming. But if you try to be, for example, a very good boxer and a very good bodybuilder, those two paths are not going to be parallel. It's going to go in completely different directions, and it's not going to be something that is doable in the long term if you want to excel at one or the other. And interestingly enough here, Shoujo says that in Japanese, the character for ways is the same for all ways. So the way of the warrior, the way of calligraphy, the way of Buddha, all of these use the term way. And what he means by that is they're all worth it. But he doesn't exist within any other way but the way of the warrior. So that's the one he prioritizes. And he says it's perfectly fine to learn about the other ways, but it should be in one pursuit only, so that you can promote your progression on the way of the warrior. And if you apply it to lifting, for example, let's say you really like science, nothing wrong with that, okay? But you need to make sure that all of the new science terms, all of the new papers you read help you in your training. If they take away from it, it's a hindrance, it's hurting you. And you can apply it to anything. If you want to train parkour, okay, you're going to train parkour. Make sure that it's going to be aligned with bodybuilding. Find things that parkour are going to help you get better at for bodybuilding. Any word a samurai utters is of great consequence. His courage is divulged by a single word. In times of peace, it is a man's words that make known his valor. In times of turmoil, words convey either strength or cowardice. A samurai's word is a flower of his heart. The weight of one's words cannot be expressed in words. It was sort of touched upon before, the fact that the word of a samurai is like steel, just like his soul, just like his spirit and his heart. It's unflexible, you can rely on it. Here, it goes even further than that, because as he tries to express the value of words, using words, Shoujo says that you cannot use words to explain it. And to me, it represents how important language is to humans, because we do have an ability to sort of read people, their actions, the way they move, the way they look at things, their aura. Maybe some people would ever tell you that they can sense the aura of someone, but really we are super reliant on words. And for most people, words are just going to be words, right? They might make a promise to you. That's an engagement. They engage themselves with their words. And there are a lot of studies that show that if you make someone engage themselves verbally, they're much more likely to actually go through with it. Because our words have that importance. They are a mark of our identity. It's like a signature. And samurais push that to the extreme, where every single word that is said by a samurai is a true expression of the self. It's a true expression of the way of the warrior. And when in times of peace, if you don't fight, if there's no war, how do you distinguish between men of valor who are reliable and just pretenders? Because if you're not fighting, you can just pretend to be a warrior. that's when the importance of words exists, because you will be able to trust the warrior that in times of peace he has the competency to be useful if it ever comes to war or violence. And that ends up being verified in times of turmoil, because at that point your words are either going to be strength if you stand out and fight, or you're going to be a coward and you're going to run. And I really like that sentence. A samurai's word is the flower of his heart. So the heart is the grain, and the flower blooms from it. So it comes directly from the self. A samurai should not, in the slightest degree, say or do something faint-heartedly. Never forget this. The depth of one's heart is discernible even through something seemingly inconsequential. Goes again with what Shoujo said about a samurai never saying that they're in pain, never saying that they are feeling fear or that they want to run away. What was that? Sorry about that. That was strange. I think there's a creature in the garage. So in this case here, what it means is that, as I just explained, you're going to be judged based on your words, right? Because it's the most reliable thing that we have. But you're also going to build up your own ego and who you are with your words. If you repeat to yourself every day that you're a loser, you're going to end up believing it. If you tell yourself that you're valiant and you're brave and you're going to get things done, guess what? That's going to happen. You're going to get things done. And it's the same with your actions. If you end up being timid in things in life that you think don't matter as much, you're going to find that you are priming yourself to being timid in times of needs, in moments where you should actually hold your ground, because you acted meek for so long that you've became meek. And that is something that is very important throughout your life to understand. You are constantly teaching yourself how to behave. So if you let yourself slip, if you let yourself be weak, it's going to start becoming your reality. And that is something to be avoided. And it's interesting that he says that the depth of one's heart is discernible through something inconsequential. Meaning that even outside of very dire situations, the way people behave and conduct themselves is going to be a good indication of how they would conduct themselves in other contexts. And that's true. We tend to judge people not necessarily on the actions that we perceive they could be doing, because we can see in the future, but in what they're doing now. And you might even lose respect for people for things that you might think are stupid, and you might tell yourself, wow, I'm really being shallow here. But in reality, that's what you're doing. You judge them based on something that seems to be non-important, but in reality, it's because it was a clear indication that in the future, they wouldn't be up to snuff. Nothing is impossible. With single-minded resolve, heaven and earth can be moved as one pleases. There is nothing that cannot be achieved. A man's fecklessness prevents him from making up his mind. Effortlessly moving heaven and earth can be accomplished through sheer single-minded determination. Agreed, agreed, agreed. A lot of people will not respond well to the nothing is impossible, because you can always find things that are impossible. But that they miss the point. That's not the point of that sentence. The point of the sentence, nothing is impossible, is to just take away the limitations of your mind. You don't need them. If the limitations exist in this world, in nature, you're going to be reminded at some point. But what if they don't? What if the only place where the limitations exist are in your mind? Well, then you're a prisoner of your own spirit. And there's nothing worse than that. You're limiting yourself. So Shoujo is trying to tell you that if you're resolved, if you are putting all of your energy in that task, you will be able to do it. You can move heaven and earth. Can you really move heaven and earth? No and yes at the same time. And if you don't make up your mind, you're never going to be able to do it. It's something I've always noticed. People will say things or they'll make what is that thing called when people is the new year resolutions. They'll make resolutions, but they are not really resolved. They're not really resolute because they haven't taken the time to realize themselves. Am I going to do this? You're going to find that at some point in your life, you're going to have that moment. You're going to have that realization where you're going to have a chat with yourself and you're going to tell yourself, can I promise myself I'm going to get that done? And if you can't answer yes, it's over because you can't even convince yourself that you can make it. So how are you going to convince others, let alone the word? How are you going to make something that you can't even believe spiritually into a physical reality? It's not possible. No one that ever achieved something hasn't started by thinking about it and trying to materialize it in their mind. A guy who becomes the world champion boxer, he thought about that for years, decades. It was a slow process, but he had to. That's the first step towards actually achieving something. It's thinking about it and telling yourself, I'm gonna do it. If you regulate your politeness in accordance with others present, it will often be substandard. These days, people are rude and fidgety. I like sentences like this because, it's not really applicable to the way of the warrior, but it's so true. It's just a random, fact of the word. Your principles and your standards and the way you treat people are going to vary depending on who you're dealing with. That's a fact. You can't really do anything about it, but you can limit it. Meaning that if you end up letting that become your new norm, you're going to find out that you're slowly losing yourself because you are adapting to every single situation to the point that you don't even know what used to be the form that you're trying to shapeshift into that new thing that is going to be best suited for the situation. And it's a slow loss of identity. A lot of people, especially young people, are going to experience that. You hang out with people and you want to be like them, you want them to accept you, so you're going to slowly start to mimic their behavior. It might even extend up to college, to actually getting into the workforce. And one day you're going to turn around and think, wow, I don't even know who I am. And that is the worst thing you can do. You need to focus on yourself. This is the center, okay, of the sun might be at the center of our universe, but you are the center of your universe. You're the most important thing. And before you can start helping others and being of use, you need to accept that fact. You need to take care of this first and foremost. And as he says, because you're going to adapt to the lowest denominator and because people are rude, you're going to end up being rude as well. So it means that your standards, who you are as a person, how courteous you could be is going to be subpar. It's not going to be as good as it could be. And when you're dealing with idiots and people who don't deserve your time or politeness, the worst thing you can do is just stoop down to their level. Because one, a lot of these people, that's the one thing they want. They want you to see them play in the dirt with them. They want you to become a pig too. You don't have to do that. Stay high and mighty. It makes them feel bad. When someone treats you badly, you kill them with kindness. It makes them feel bad, of course. If they endanger your safety or they go too far, you strike back. But for the most part, you'll find that these people don't even have the ability to touch you. And if they don't, just play it cool. Have fun with it. Warriors extolled as being highly skilled in the arts come across as being imprudent. To become accomplished in an art necessitates a preoccupation with that activity to the detriment of all else. We've already covered that. Basically, don't let yourself be diverted in two different ways. You need to have a single-minded focus on one way. Everything you do until the age of 40 should be executed with all of your energy. It is preferable for a samurai approaching the age of 50 to moderate his behavior. As he said before, a young warrior needs to be strong-headed. You have the physical energy to be spiritually energetic now. So do it. Expand it. You're not going to save any of it. By taking it slow in your 20s, 30s, it's not going to magically reappear when you're 60. So use it now, because you're teaching yourself how to be that way, how to be a little bit more dominant, and it's going to carry over. You don't want to spend your 20s being meek and thinking, one day I'll be a man and, I'll act like a man. Act like a man now and act like a man later. There are many who like to impart more lessons in the world today, but few who choose to listen. Moreover, fewer still are those who actually abide by the precepts. No one ventures to teach morally to a man in his 30s. Without advice, he does as he pleases and continues with his foolish antics and wastes his life in a downward spiral of nefariousness. So here, two parts. First part, Shoujo is saying that there are a lot of people who are going to be giving lessons, morality lessons, but for the most part, they don't live it. And that is the Western world in a nutshell. On both sides of the spectrum, you'll have people who think they have the moral high ground, who are going to have very strict ideologies, and when you dig into it, you realize that they don't even follow it themselves. So why would you take advice? Why would you follow the doctrines of people who don't even abide by that ideology themselves? To me, it just looks like they're trying to manipulate me into doing their biting. They want me to do something that I personally don't want to, but they have all of their books and rules that dictates that if I don't do it, I'm a bad person. So they're trying to shame me. They're going to whip me into submission. And of course, you never submit, ever, to anyone. And I also find that usually the type of people who are the most righteous, at least in accordance to their own principles, they tend to not really talk about it, and they tend to not project it on other people, meaning that they truly think it's the best way for them to live their life, so they'll do it. If someone asks for advice, they will give it to them, but they won't try and be proselytist about it. They're not going to try and be evangelical about it. They'll just do it. They'll be an example. Instead of telling someone to stop doing something, why don't you show them through your actions what it is like to not do that thing, or to do that thing, how beneficial it is, how good it makes you feel. That, you'll find that people respond much better to that. And after that, he talks about men in their 30s who don't take advice, they do as they please. You could call them bachelors, you could call them man children. You have a lot of these days. Men who refuse to take responsibility, meaning that they are going to spend their entire life in the pursuit of pleasure. They're going to make sure that they never are tied down, or they don't have to actually have duties. And to me, they miss the point, because they're going to wake up one day and be very sorry for themselves, because they sort of pushed away things that would have made them happy in the long run for something that made them a little bit happier now. And that's hedonism, the pursuit of immediate pleasure, which I personally don't advise people follow, because it's already hardwired in our bones to be seeking that immediate relief. You don't need to, on top of that, follow an ideology. I would advise you to follow an ideology that is opposed to that, so that your biological nature meets a cultural blocker. And we're going to be talking about that when we talk about Stoicism, because Stoicism is going to give much more advice about that. And I will eventually, maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, show you the two books that we're going to be reviewing after that and analyzing together, so that you can get them yourself, read them first, so that you're not influenced by my analysis, and then we'll get to them. But we still have a lot of the book to go through. So I think I'm going to finish with this one. Great talent takes time to mature. An undertaking of consequence takes 20 or 30 years to achieve. In service as well, if a man hurries to achieve something meritorious, he will speak of business that is not his concern. He may be described as a promising young man, he will become arrogant and rude and act with an air of smugness as if he was already accomplished. So again, he's talking about the double-edged sword that is talent. You need time to mature. And a lot of the issue with talent is that people who have talent start much higher than common people in their activity of choice, and they also go up much faster. But it also means that they're going to eventually reach a level that is unheard of. And that's tough. It's a tough situation to be in because where do you progress from there? It doesn't mean that the progression is impossible. It means that since no one has done it before or they don't have an example of a peer who's done it, they become conceited because they feel like they've done it all. But as Aishojo says, it takes 20 to 30 years. And we're going to stop here. So next time we start again at 161. Thank you for watching. We're actually going to soon enter a new portion of the book, which is book 2, but we're still only halfway there. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.